My daughter thought age had stolen my eyesight. She thought the trembling in my hands meant weakness. She thought a 70-year-old widower spent his evenings drifting through memories instead of paying attention to the world around him. But she forgot something important about me. Before I became an old man, sitting quietly at the end of the dining table, I spent 40 years studying chemical reactions. I built my life around observing tiny details most people missed. One drop too much, 1 degree too high, one careless movement. That was all it took for an experiment to turn deadly. And on that freezing December night, my own daughter forgot who had taught her that lesson in the first place. The kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and pumpkin soup. Outside, snow hammered against the windows of my Chicago home, while the old pipes groaned softly inside the walls. Rebecca stood near the stove with her back facing me, stirring the pot slowly. To anyone else, it looked like a normal family dinner. A daughter caring for her elderly father after the death of his wife. A warm meal, a peaceful house. But peaceful houses do not create silence like that. Real peace breathes. That kitchen felt suffocated. I sat at the head of the table, pretending to read the newspaper. In reality, I was watching a reflection in the dark microwave door mounted above the stove. Rebecca had no idea the glass reflected everything behind her perfectly. Her shoulders were tense, her breathing shallow. Her right hand kept disappearing into the pocket of her gray cardigan. Then I saw it, a tiny blue vial, small enough to hide in her palm. She looked toward the hallway to make sure nobody was coming. Her husband Todd was still in the garage pretending to organize tools he had never once used in his life. Rebecca uncapped the vial carefully, her fingers shaking so badly I thought she might drop it. For one hopeful second, I believed she would stop. I believed she would put away and break down crying and tell me she had made a terrible mistake. Instead, she tilted the bottle. 3 drops fell into the soup, then 4, then 5. She stirred quickly, wiping the spoon against the edge of the pot, like she was afraid the evidence might somehow cling to the metal. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs might crack. I remembered teaching her how to ride a bicycle in the park when she was 6 years old. I remembered sitting in hospital waiting rooms when she broke her wrist at 12. I remembered taking a second mortgage on the house so she could attend Northwestern University without debt. I remembered selling my wife's jewelry after Rebecca and Todd buried themselves beneath gambling losses and luxury vacations. $50,000. Gone in one check because my daughter cried on the phone and begged me for help. And now she was poisoning my soup. The strange thing was not the fear. It was the disappointment. Fear passes quickly. Disappointment settles into your bones. Rebecca turned toward the sink to rinse the spoon. The water started running. That was my moment. I did not panic. People think survival comes from strength. It doesn't. Survival comes from control. Slowly, I reached for the bowls sitting on the counter beside me. Mine was closer to the edge. Hers sat beside it. I moved silently, switching their positions in less than 2 seconds. Years of laboratory work had trained my hands better than age had weakened them. When Rebecca turned around again, I was exactly where I had been before. An old man, quiet, harmless. The front door opened. Todd walked inside carrying the smell of cold air and cheap cologne. He smiled too widely when he saw me. Todd always smiled like a salesman moments before lying. "Well," he said loudly, rubbing his hands together. "Smells incredible in here." His eyes moved immediately toward the soup bowls. Not toward Rebecca. Not toward me. Toward the bowls. That was when I knew he was part of this. He came behind my chair and squeezed my shoulder hard enough to hurt. "How's the king doing tonight?" he asked. I looked up slowly. "Hungry," I answered. Todd grinned. Rebecca carried the bowls to the table. She placed the poison bowl directly in front of herself without realizing it. The clean bowl landed in front of me. For a brief moment, guilt flashed across her face. Not guilt for trying to murder me. Guilt because she believed she was about to watch it happen. "Eat while it's hot, Dad," she whispered. We sat together beneath the yellow kitchen lights while snow buried the world outside. 3 people, 1 poison bowl. And only one person at that table understood the game had already changed. I lifted my spoon slowly. Rebecca stopped breathing. Todd froze halfway through pulling out his chair. They were waiting for the old man to die quietly. I tasted the soup, nutmeg, cream, pumpkin, and no bitterness, because the poison was no longer in my bowl. "Delicious," I said softly. Todd exhaled through his nose. Rebecca forced herself to smile. Then she lifted her own spoon and swallowed. The first few minutes passed quietly. The sound of spoons scraping ceramic echoed around the kitchen, while the storm outside grew louder. Todd kept glancing at me every few seconds like he expected me to collapse onto the table at any moment. Rebecca avoided eye contact completely. She focused only on her soup, eating slowly, carefully, nervously. I watched them the same way I used to watch unstable chemical reactions in the laboratory. Patiently, calmly, waiting to see which element failed first. Todd finally cleared his throat. "So, Harold," he said casually, "Rebecca and I were talking earlier about the house." Of course they were. Everything with Todd eventually became about money. He had entered my daughter's life smiling like a charming entrepreneur, but behind the expensive watches and tailored jackets was a desperate gambler drowning in debt. I discovered the truth 2 years after their wedding when collectors began calling my house asking for him. Credit cards, sports betting, failed investments, luxury cars. Todd burned through money faster than a wildfire through dry grass. And every time he destroyed something, Rebecca came running to me crying. "House maintenance is becoming difficult for you," Todd continued carefully, "especially after Margaret passed." Margaret, my wife, the only person who would have seen through this entire performance immediately. I answered. Rebecca swallowed another spoonful of poisoned soup before speaking. "Dad, we're just worried about you." Worried. That word almost made me laugh. People planning murder always hide behind concern. "You forgot the water bill last month," she added. "No," I said calmly. "I paid it 3 weeks early." Todd jumped in quickly, and the garage door was left open. "You know the code," I replied. The room became still, tiny cracks forming beneath their performance. Rebecca's hand trembled slightly as she lifted another spoonful to her lips. Then it happened. She stopped chewing. Her eyebrows pulled together. A small, confused expression crossed her face. "Todd," she whispered. He looked up immediately. "What?" My throat feels strange. There it was. The beginning. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Todd stared at her, then at me, then back at her again. Panic flickered across his face before he buried it. "You're probably just tired," he said quickly. Rebecca coughed. Once. Then again. Harder. She pressed a hand against her chest. "It burns," she whispered. I took another calm spoonful of soup. "Tastes fine to me." Rebecca suddenly pushed her chair backward. The legs scraped violently across the hardwood floor. Her face had gone pale. Sweat formed along her forehead. Her breathing became shallow. I recognized the symptoms immediately. Digitalis. Foxglove extract. A poison that attacks the heart. A poison designed to mimic cardiac failure. A poison sophisticated enough that most doctors might initially mistake it for a natural medical emergency in an elderly man. Whoever planned this thought carefully. But they underestimated one thing. They chose a chemistry professor as their victim. "My vision," Rebecca stammered. "The lights, they look strange." Todd stood up so fast his chair tipped backward onto the floor. "Rebecca?" She gagged suddenly, then vomited violently onto the kitchen tiles. Todd rushed toward her. I remained seated, watching, learning, confirming. Rebecca collapsed to her knees, clutching her stomach, while her entire body trembled uncontrollably. "Dad!" Todd shouted. "Help me!" I looked at him quietly. "What exactly did she put into the soup?" I asked. The blood drained from his face. For 1 second, the mask disappeared completely. "No! What are you talking about?" he stammered. Rebecca began convulsing. Her hands clawed desperately against the floor. "Call an ambulance," I said. Todd grabbed his phone with shaking fingers and dialed emergency services, while Rebecca gasped for air. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and she understood. Her eyes shifted slowly from my untouched bowl to her own. Realization exploded across her face. "Dad," she whispered weakly. I knelt beside her carefully. My voice remained calm. "You should save your strength," I told her quietly. "You'll need it when the police arrive." Tears filled her eyes instantly, not from pain, from fear. Fear because she suddenly realized the old man she tried to poison was not confused, not weak, not blind. Sirens screamed in the distance. Todd kept shouting into the phone, while Rebecca trembled on the floor beside me. Then something caught my attention. A white tissue had fallen from Rebecca's cardigan pocket during the seizure. Wrapped inside it was the empty blue vial. Amateur mistake. I picked it up silently and slipped it into my coat pocket. Evidence. Outside, flashing ambulance lights reflected red against the snow. Inside, my family was collapsing around me. And strangely, I felt nothing. No rage. No sadness. Only clarity. Because betrayal does something terrifying to the human heart. Once you survive the first shock, everything becomes cold. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Doctors rushed Rebecca through double doors while nurses shouted instructions across the hallway. Todd paced near the waiting area pretending to panic, but I could see calculation behind his eyes. He kept glancing toward me, trying to judge how much I knew. Not enough, he hoped. Everything, unfortunately. I sat quietly in a plastic chair, with my wool coat folded neatly across my lap. An old man waiting for news about his daughter. That was the role everyone believed. But 20 minutes earlier, while paramedics loaded Rebecca into the ambulance, I sent a single text message. One word. Foxglove. The message went to Leonard Banks, my attorney, and the only person alive who knew the truth about my finances. You see, Rebecca and Todd believed I was surviving on retirement savings and a modest pension from the university. That was the story I allowed everyone to believe. The real truth was very different. 5 years earlier, I sold a pharmaceutical patent connected to a cardiac medication trial. The sale made me over $15 million. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough money to become a target. Margaret warned me before she died. Never tell people how much you truly have, she whispered from her hospital bed. Money changes how they love you. She was right. So I hid everything. The investments, the accounts, the properties. Only Leonard knew. And over the last year, something terrible became impossible to ignore. Rebecca stopped visiting unless she needed money. Todd suddenly became obsessed with discussing wills and estate planning. They pushed harder each month. Questions about life insurance. Questions about power of attorney. Questions about assisted living facilities. At first, I convinced myself they were simply immature. Then I overheard Todd one night. He thought I was asleep upstairs. But I heard every word. If the old man dies naturally, Todd whispered to Rebecca, everything becomes easier. Naturally. That word haunted me for weeks. Then tonight happened. The emergency room doors burst open, and a doctor stepped outside. Family of Rebecca King? Todd rushed forward dramatically. How is she? The doctor removed his glasses tiredly. She's stable for now. We managed to slow the cardiac reaction before full arrest occurred. Todd pretended to collapse with relief. What caused it? He asked. The doctor hesitated. Digitalis toxicity. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Todd slowly turned toward me, and then he made his move. It was him, he said. The waiting room froze. 2 police officers near the entrance looked up immediately. Todd pointed directly at me. He grows poisonous plants. Todd continued loudly. Foxglove. He's obsessed with chemistry and herbal experiments. He must have mixed something accidentally into the food. The officers approached carefully. Sir, one asked me, do you grow foxglove plants? Yes, I answered calmly. Todd's eyes lit up. He thought he had found an escape. He's been forgetting things lately. Todd continued rapidly. Leaving doors open. Missing bills. Mixing medications. Rebecca tried to help him tonight, and now she's fighting for her life. A beautiful lie. Simple. Convincing. Especially against an old widower, sitting silently in a hospital chair. The officer studied me carefully. Sir, we need to ask a few questions. Before I could answer, another voice interrupted. That won't be necessary. Leonard Banks walked into the waiting room, wearing a black overcoat dusted with snow. Todd's expression changed instantly. Confusion, then concern. Leonard approached calmly and handed me a leather folder. Inside were documents, bank freezes, asset protections, revoked authorizations. Every financial connection Rebecca and Todd had to my money disappeared with a single signature. Todd stared at the paperwork. What is this? He demanded. Leonard looked directly at him. Mr. Whitmore, he said coldly, effective immediately. You and your wife no longer have access to any accounts connected to Harold King. Todd blinked. What accounts? Leonard's expression never changed. All of them. I watched confusion spread slowly across Todd's face. Then panic. Real panic. Because predators only become terrified when the prey suddenly stands up. You told us you were broke, Todd whispered. I looked him directly in the eyes. No, I said quietly. I allowed you to believe it. Rebecca's doctor emerged again. She's awake, he announced. Todd immediately moved toward the doors. 2 detectives stepped into the hallway. At the same moment, we need to speak with both of you first, one detective said. Todd froze. The detective held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was the blue vial. Apparently, one of the paramedics discovered traces of residue on Rebecca's cardigan. Todd looked at me and finally understood. This was never going away. 3 hours later, snow still buried the city outside Mercy Hospital. Todd sat alone inside an interrogation room while detectives searched through financial records connected to his gambling debts. They discovered insurance policies taken out against my life only 6 months earlier. Policies Rebecca claimed were meant to help with funeral costs. Funeral costs. Interesting phrase when you are secretly planning the funeral yourself. Rebecca remained under observation in the cardiac unit. The doctors saved her. Part of me wished they had not. Not because I wanted my daughter dead. Because survival meant consequences. Death and suffering quickly. Living forces people to face what they became. A nurse finally approached me around 2 a.m. "She's asking for you," she said softly. I followed her through silent hallways illuminated by pale fluorescent lights. Rebecca looked smaller in the hospital bed somehow. Fragile. Machines beeped steadily beside her, while an oxygen tube rested beneath her nose. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be. Then I remembered the blue vial. I remained standing near the doorway. Rebecca stared at the ceiling before finally speaking. "How long did you know? Tonight?" I asked quietly. "Or in general?" Tears slid down the sides of her face. "We were desperate." "No," I corrected gently. "You were greedy." She closed her eyes. "You don't understand what Todd put us through." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I paid his debts 4 separate times." Her breathing became shaky. "He said if we could get control of the estate, we could start over." Estate. Interesting word. Not father. Not family. Estate. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. Rebecca's face crumpled instantly. "Dad?" That's not an answer. For several seconds, only the heart monitor spoke. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I used to." That sentence hurt more than the poison ever could. Because hatred is loud, but love, dying slowly over time, is silent. I stepped closer to the bed. "When your mother was dying," I said softly, "her final fear wasn't death. It was you." Rebecca looked at me in shock. "She saw what money was doing to you." I continued. "She begged me not to keep rescuing you." Fresh tears rolled down Rebecca's cheeks. I didn't listen. The monitor beeped steadily. "You know what the saddest part is?" I asked. "I still would have helped you." Rebecca began crying openly now. Not dramatic crying. Broken crying. The kind that comes from finally seeing yourself clearly. "But you chose this instead." She covered her face weakly. "I'm sorry." I believe she meant it. And somehow that made everything worse. Because genuine regret arrives too late. Always. A detective entered quietly behind me. "Mr. King," he said respectfully, "we're ready for your statement." Rebecca's eyes widened with fear. "Dad, please." I looked at my daughter one final time. The girl I once carried on my shoulders during fireworks shows. The woman who poisoned my soup. Then I spoke the hardest truth I had ever said in my life. "I already lost my daughter tonight." I whispered. "Now you'll have to live as the person who replaced her." I turned and walked toward the door. "Dad," she cried. I stopped briefly, without turning around. The hallway behind me felt endless, cold, empty. "What happens to me now?" she asked. I finally looked back, and for the first time all night, my voice sounded tired. "That," I said quietly, "depends on whether you tell the truth before Todd does." Then I walked away. Outside the hospital, dawn slowly began pushing to the snow clouds above Chicago. My driver opened the car door, while Leonard waited beside the curb. "Where to now?" he asked. I looked back at the glowing hospital windows one final time. For 70 years, I believed betrayal came from enemies. I was wrong. The deepest betrayals come from the people who learn exactly where your heart is, then aim directly for it. But sometimes survival is not about revenge. Sometimes survival means finally seeing the truth clearly enough to walk away from the people willing to destroy you. I climbed into the car slowly, and as the city disappeared behind us beneath the falling snow, I realized something strange. The poison in that house had never been inside the soup. It had been growing there for years, and at last, I had stopped swallowing it.